Well, as is always the case with most things in life, the unplanned trips or things that we do always seem to turn out to be the best. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I'd set myself a target. Well, I've set myself this target for a number of years, but to achieve the target, it was going to take a massive, massive stroke of luck. And that was to catch the big one out of Brasenose 1. Now, there's a lot of fish in there. It's a place that I love fishing, but the big fish in there, or the biggest one, the Beast, is a fish that I've never caught, irrespective of it being a double, right up to what it was when I caught it a couple of weeks ago. And I fish there every winter because it's a place where you can go and you can get loads of bites and you can have real good fun in doing so, but you never expect to catch it yourself. And again, that was an impromptu filming trip with the Fox cameras. Lo and behold, the fifth fish of the session, it pops up, 51 pound and 12 ounces. And I sort of drove away after the filming a little bit, not lost, because I love carp fishing and I will fish anywhere and I will fish for anything, but I'd really set sort of my stall out to fish there the winter. And like I said, not just for that fish, but to catch the other fish that are in it, 'cause there's a lot of big fish in there. And after I caught it, and I caught a few more fish that trip, every time I had a bite, it was like, well, it isn't going to be, because I've caught the one that I wanted to catch. So yeah, I drove away feeling a little bit lost, not really knowing what to do. And I've got a Syndicate, which is where I am today. And even though I've been a member now for just about 3 years, I've not really done a lot of time. Now, the fish are constantly growing. It's a phenomenal place. The stock of fish is off the charts. But there is now a few 40-pounders in it. And I thought, you know what? It has form for doing bites in winter, but it's never going to be as prolific as the day ticket, purely and simply just because it's a Syndicate, there's less fish per acre, and there's also less anglers, which does make it a little bit harder. Now, being an addict, I suppose you could say, of carp fishing, I was sat at home on Sunday night, and I'm sat there with my missus. She's gone up to bed. I've had a couple of games of Call of Duty, as I like to do in the evening. And I went up to bed and I just couldn't settle. And which is unlike me. Normally I'm straight away, I'll go to bed and I think, well, I'll get on with it in the morning. And I just could not settle. And I was rolling over in bed and she just said, why don't you just go fishing? She said, you clearly don't want to be at home. She said, just go fishing. So I left at 3 o'clock in the morning, which again is unlike me. Normally I'd leave at 3 o'clock to sit on the gate to try and get in a swim. But I left at 3 o'clock in the morning because I knew there was nobody here. Now, I knew the weather over sort of the next, well, what we are now, 3 days on, the next sort of 3 to 5 days was going to be good. But the lake hasn't been fishing great. So I had a walk around, found a few fish, I could hear them show, and I set up in a peg purely and simply based on the fact that for the weather that was coming in, it was comfortable. Now, this peg is known as the caravan swim. There's a big barn behind where you can take refuge and sit. So it meant I've had minimal kit out in the swim, but I've also been able to fish in comfort. Now, whether I caught 2 fish on this trip or the 19 like I've eventually ended up catching, it has just made the session so much more comfortable. Now, like I say, coming onto here, the target was to catch a big one, and I never, ever in my wildest dreams expected to get one of the big ones. I fish this place exactly the same as I do everywhere else, and I think that's a massively important thing in your angling. Wherever you go, always stick to what you know, because what you know will always get you out of trouble. I found a spot, the wind was pushing in, and it has been relentless rain. It's only been now that the sky has finally parted, the sun's come out, and it's actually pleasant to sit outside and not get soaking wet. So I put a lot of bait out. There's not loads and loads of fish in here, but when they get on you, I want to concentrate them in one area, and if you can keep them there, you can and I know it sounds obvious, you can get quite a lot of bites. They're very spooky fish. They're always on edge. There's no snags between me and any of the other banks, and as soon as you make a bit of noise, they move off. So what I like to do is to put all of my bait in one initial hit. So between sort of 2:30 and 4 o'clock every afternoon, I've put a whole bucket of bait in. And I think that's key, certainly for this time of year, because I don't want to be casting at fish all day and moving them around. I want to put my bed of bait out, my rod's on top, and then as soon as the fish sort of break away from the central zone, which is where they spend a lot of time, once they're on me, I've got them in a real tight area, and they do become not easy, but they become very, very catchable. Now, there isn't, well, I say there isn't, there's 4 or 5 fish in it over 40 pounds, which is a good stock of fish, but there's one in particular, the big fully scaled, which I think you will agree it is an absolutely amazing, amazing looking carp. And much like fishing on Brasenose 1 the other week, you never expect it to be you to get that fish. And it was chucking it down the first night. I caught a series of fish up to 33 pound. The second night was no different, chucking it down. And like I said before, setting up in a peg that's comfortable has enabled me to probably catch a few more fish than what I would have done should I have been in a swim where I didn't have that. Because this time of year, let's be honest, no one wants to be sat there uncomfortable. And when it's chucking it down with rain and the wind's in your face, it's very, very easy just to zip the bivvy door down and think, you know what, I'll deal with that in the morning. But having the barn behind and having everything set up and everything comfortable, I was able to fish through the second night. The action sort of slowed down, and then in the morning it happened. And again, when your luck's in and your name's on something, it's meant to be. You know, this is a barbless hook water. I don't fish barbless hooks on any other lake unless obviously the rules state. I'm not dropping the leads, and this fish felt different from the start, but when it sort of started coming towards the net, it was wrapped up in a massive snapped off willow branch. Now, normally that fish would have probably fell off just because of the obstacles that was around it and trying to get it in. It's quite weedy out in front, but like I say, when your name's on something, it's just destined to be. Wow, wow, wow. They don't come better than that, I tell you. If you're going to catch a target, catch one in style. There we go. It don't come much better than that. Winter target achieved. The big fully, 40 pound, 14 ounces. Say no more. That is a phenomenal carp. And there she is. One last look. Struggling to comprehend what's happened these past few weeks. That is the icing on the cake. What a fish from an incredible place at over 40 pounds. Amazing. So even though I'm sitting here having had 19 fish, including the biggest fully scaled in the lake and one of sort of 4 or 5 40s, the stock of fish in this lake is incredible. And much like linear, the reason why I've fished linear for a number of years, not because, oh, it's easy and I can go there and I can catch and it's all about catching fish just to post on social media. Fish are always coming through. So you might see fish in here that are 16, 18, 20 pound, but you might not catch that fish for 5 or 6 years. And then by the time it's your turn, that fish could then be over 40 pound. And the rate that these fish are growing, it beggars belief just how clean they are and how big they're getting. They're absolutely immaculate. And this is a place where I can also come just for a bit of a getaway. Now, I love fishing anywhere. If it's busy, I'll speak to anybody. But this is a place where I can just come, I can switch off. And I know with really how little I've caught from the Syndicate in comparison to what's in here, that for many, many years to come, I'm going to be able to come here and enjoy the fishing that this place has to offer. My tactics as we enter the colder months, to be honest with you, don't really change a great deal. Now, this time of year, the carp are almost becoming as hard as what they're possibly going to be to catch. Now, I know that obviously when the water gets freezing cold, they can be quite tricky, but this time of year, the fish have taken a real hammering throughout the course of the spring and the summer, and coming into autumn, autumn just isn't what it used to be. So now more than ever, it is important that you get your tactics exactly right. Now, what I see a lot of people doing is they'll have 1 or 2 trips, they'll struggle in the autumn, and they'll change everything completely. Now more than ever, it is key to stick to what you know, because what you know will always get you out of trouble. Now, what I do, and what I've done for years, is I incorporate natural bait. Now, there is absolutely no denying that come rain or shine, warm or cold, natural bait fishing is absolutely phenomenal, and it's a way of getting more bites when you might not necessarily get bites if you didn't incorporate them in your mix. But I see so many people again make so many mistakes. Now, a lot of people, the water gets cold and they go all out natural bait approach. Now, yeah, this is absolutely brilliant and it will get you bites. But one thing I will say by just going in heavy with the naturals is you've got to remember that there's a lot of other species of fish that reside in the lakes. Certainly that I fish, and probably the same as the lakes that you fish. Now, if you go all out natural, you're then feeding every single fish that swims inside that lake. What I like to do is I like to keep it the same in terms of mix as what I use through the year, whether that be mulched up boilies, on this particular session whole boilies, and I'll get to that in a minute, and as well as sweet corn, as well as some particles, and then I will add the natural, but I won't go too mad on the natural. And I sort of liken putting naturals in your bait as putting a bit of salt on your chips, if that makes sense. You can put a bit on, yeah, it makes it appealing, but if you put too much on, it can almost be off-putting, and it can attract too many small fish into the peg, and before long you've got a massive sort of area that screams to carp, don't go there, because there's loads of fish there, they're there for a reason, and they'll avoid it. So using naturals, you've got to know how to use them, and again, have them as fresh as possible. Natural bait is like eating fresh meat. You wouldn't eat meat that's been left out on the kitchen side for 4, 5, 6 hours. You want it fresh, straight out the fridge. You want to cook it, prepare it, and eat it, and it's exactly the same as what the carp want. That's my theory on it anyway, but always keep your natural bait as fresh as possible and don't overdo it. Now, like I said, this particular session is a bit of an off-the-cuff session, so what you'd normally see me do is mulch up the boilies, but I didn't know until about an hour before I actually left my house that I was going to go fishing, and I haven't actually had time to sort of pre-soak any boilies, but I am using the Manila Active. Now, what the Manila Active is in terms of mulching is normally I would pre-soak just the normal Manila when I get to the lake, mulch it up, but because the Active has the coating on, the coating is almost acting like the mulch, if you like, when it's been in the water for probably an hour and 2 hours, and to that I am simply adding a very, very basic mix of a few cans of sweet corn, a couple of pints of casters, and a couple of pints of maggots. Again, not overdoing it, but by putting the boilies in and the sweet corn in, I'm making sure that when the fish come over it, there's enough bait there for the carp to eat, and as this session has proven, this is a mix, and this is a method that works time and time again. Aside from adding natural baits to your mix, it obviously gives you options to then add them to a hook bait. Now, it's all right having a load of bait out there, but you want to make sure your hook bait is not only matching what you're putting out, but is a bit more attractive to what you're putting out. And obviously when you're spotting your natural bait, it's spreading out and the fish are having to grub around, but by putting a nice ball of, say, maggots or worm on top of a boilie. Now, I'm using peach and peppers. It's a hook bait that I've caught so many fish on. I can't even begin to tell you how many fish I've caught on it, and they work time and time again. But by adding a couple of maggots on top of it, certainly on this trip, has proved that by sort of sticking to what you know and adding a little bit of attraction to already a fantastic bait, you can keep on getting bites no matter how cold it gets. This type of fishing is very, very easy. It's very, very basic. But the reason it is easy and it's basic is because I've managed to refine everything down, so I'm maximising my chance of a bite by keeping my rods in the water a lot longer than what I would be if I was sat in a bivvy tying a fancy rig. When it comes to fishing at this time of year as well, putting the extra effort in definitely 100% without doubt gets you more bites. Now, it's almost like the British weather has known that every time I've picked the spawn rod up, it is going to absolutely lash it down. And for the 3 evenings that I've put bait out, for the whole 2 hours that I've been spomming, it has done nothing but rain. Now, the wind's been driving in my face, it's been uncomfortable. Everything about this trip, bar having the barn behind me, has been uncomfortable. As soon as you leave the barn and you're around the rods, it's going to be wet, you're going to have to put your waterproof kit on, and it does make things very, very difficult. But that big one, for example, I'm only the 5th person that's ever caught it. Now, upon reflection, if I'd have wound my rods in on the second night, which would have been very, very easy to do, or just half-heartedly chuck them back out, I might not have caught that fish. Now, if that fish has only been caught 5 or 4 times previous to me catching it, I might have to wait another 6, 7, 10, however many years to have an opportunity of catching that fish again. Rightly so, I would have never known that it was over my spot, but by putting the extra effort in and getting that bite, that alone is enough. But I love catching carp of any strain, no matter how they look. But there's just something about the fish in here that I just get that sort of heart racing moment when it goes off, because you don't know what it's going to be. Now, the only fish that I haven't had this trip has been a common. I've had plain looking mirrors, I've had linears, I've had scalies, I've had fully scaled, and I had one in particular called the Sergeant. Now that again is a very, very rare fish. I don't think it's been out as many times as what the fully has. It's got 3 massive, great big scales, a proper... If you didn't know that these were young fish in here, you would look at it and think that fish is years and years old. And how these carp have settled into the lake. Now this lake, in my opinion, has everything that a lake should offer and that a carp would want. And again, from a personal perspective, you know, and I'm sure a lot of people watching this will know that I haven't done much syndicate fishing or much fishing away from the day ticket scene for years and years and years. So not only is it a great environment for the carp, but it's also an environment that I've also got to get used to. You've got shallow water, you've got sort of marginal snags where the fish get in, you've got silt, weed, clay. On top of that as well, you've got crayfish. And again, a lot of the places that I fish don't have crayfish. So it's all about overcoming these obstacles to get a bite. And when you do get a bite, it's a real sense of achievement, certainly from here. And this trip has just been one of them trips that will probably never ever happen again. Everything has gone well, the weather was perfect, just everything. Now, I'm not saying that it was fantastic angling to catch that amount of fish, don't get me wrong. Just because the weather's good, it doesn't mean you can put your net in the margin and they swim into it, but sometimes everything just goes right. And these past few weeks, everything has just gone right. Well, that was about that then. An absolutely stunning Cotswolds 30 pounder, my 7th of this trip alone. And this fish really just rounds off an absolutely incredible couple of weeks angling. And as the saying goes, when you're rolling, you've just got to keep on rolling.